I got to change that to instead of W. Allen Gosline. Go Gosline.
It's Gosline.
Gosline. All right.
Yeah.
That's not German?
It's, I don't know. We don't really, you know how it is. It's like old school, right? We don't really know, but it is a derivative of Gosling, right? The baby goose. Yeah.
Gosline. Yeah. Yeah. All right. I got it. All right. And I got to change this to W. Allen Gosline. It does sound like you're like, when you say W. Allen Gosline, it does sound like you're like a
writer, right?
A writer, but or a contributor to NPR or something.
The Atlantic.
The Atlantic. Yeah.
Just trying to give myself a little gravitas, you know.
Yeah. The latest article from W. Allen Gosline.
The latest barbarian book from W. Allen Gosline.
All right, Bill, we're going to do the intro and we're going to jump right into it. You ready?
Oh, yeah, ready.
All right, here we go. Strap in. All right. All right. Welcome to, oh, hang on. I got to move my window, my drag right here. All right, here we go. All right. Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 113. I'm your host, Barney Smith of storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed and talented comic creator, Bill Gosline. Bill, how you doing?
I'm good, Barney. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, and I'm excited because you just ended up having a successful Kickstarter, your first Kickstarter,
yeah.
And it was a rounding success, a Baby Barbarian.
Yeah, it was a success. Yeah. There were a few things that were actually unanticipated, but were better. Not bad things, but good things that actually happened out of it. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, because like you're talk about like an IP thing. You have you're making a video game, correct? Some sort of like an interactive video. It was, and I learned this by watching your other interview.
Oh, nice.
The term, the Metroidzilla style.
Metroidvania.
Okay. Metroidvania style video game. And before you started the project, you didn't know that term actually existed.
Mm-mm.
So
but you remember Metroid and Castlevania? That's
exactly, yeah.
I didn't even know that it was a retro thing. I was like, what would be kind of fun is to do like a kind of a retro video game for this because of my generation. And then everyone's like, oh, the Metroidvania thing is so popular right now. It's like, okay.
It's like an actual thing, yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised.
And then you also, so that was kind of a side part, but you also, looking at you're working on as well the a companion tabletop game with that, or card game or something. Was that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really exciting. So the Metroidvania is we call it a video game teaser because it's basically one scene from the comic that is explored using like the characters from the comic, which I had made into sprites. Right. But it's really only a teaser because it's just a one screen thing. But I don't know. I just wanted to. Well, the truth is that I kind of had my friend in Hawaii was working with this program, and when I started, I was kind of like, I'm just like a classic, trying to how do you say, the shotgun method, right? You shoot everything at the wall and hope something hits. And I like, so he happened to be working at helping people learn how to use Unity. And he's like, I have a team over there that actually needs a project. And I was like, oh, I got a project. And so that's how we ended up working with them. And they've been very generous. They've been very professional. This is our first go around for all of them. And, it's been a lot of fun, but it's we just call it a teaser because there is not, again, it's just a one screen thing, and it's just to give a sense. And we've been using it as, sort of like enticement, because the comic right now is really our main focus. But then you mentioned the card game, and yeah, I actually found a designer in Spain and who I like, and we really hit it off. And the card game, the tabletop community is really generous. You know, indie comics people tend to be very generous as well. But I think the gaming, I think it's partly just the medium. You know what I mean? Because a lot of, you know, there's a certain like monomaniacal aspect to comic books, right? You know what I mean? Because you're like, it's a classic. You're going to write the thing about a superhuman and all that, you know. But then games inherently are about community.
Right. And that's a good point.
Yeah. And so like we just started hitting it off like gangbusters, and I pitched him the initial design ideas, and then he actually had the experience to be able to crunch the numbers and really perfect the mechanics. And we started maybe about a month ago, and we're already in the point where we're able to, I'm hoping I'll be able to play it with him remotely in the next week or so, and then we can start working on the cards and stuff. So yeah, it's super exciting. Well, for me, it's very exciting. Yeah.
Right. And so I mean, because as you said, like you're dealing with, you know, different mediums. You're dealing with the video game piece. You're dealing with the card game piece and the actual comic book as well. So talk to us a bit about how you kind of had to tweak some of the narratives because some of it is passive entertainment, meaning sit back is still going to go whether you participate or not. And then there's active entertainment, like reading a book, where it doesn't go unless you actively are engaged in it. How did you have to, from your creative sense, how did you have to kind of change some of the design aspects of any of those?
That's a really good question. I think the key to that is making sure that you have a good mission statement and you are clear on your theme. And when one of the first things I did when I was doing Baby Barbarian was I made my mission statement, which is every iteration or every form of Baby Barbarian should be enjoyable by adults, i.e. parents and children alike. And so that's kind of the driving thing behind it. And then the theme is about cooperation, participation, and working together in this case in a family unit to overcome challenges. And I think, you know, that was intentional. You know, I've said in the past that, you know, we as a species, we're facing a lot of existential challenges. And I think that the old narrative of, you know, like the one guy who's going to go out and save, and of course in the past it was a guy, right? Most of the time, is going to go out and save everybody. I think that's an unrealistic, and I think it's kind of a, I would say it's, you know, it's kind of it's unrealistic, it's outdated, and it's a bit, how do I say, you know, it's kind of a negative message in a lot of ways.
Right.
You know, and it kind of leads to narcissism and that kind of thing, you know, that you're going to be able to solve all the world's problems. So the theme, that's the theme, right? It's about working together. And so with those in mind, and when I'm talking to other people, I will just say, like, you know, what about, for example, the video game? Why don't we make this video game? Why don't we just imagine it's a scene from the comic? There's a scene in the comic where Brahm, who's like the titular Baby Barbarian, he needs to get out of us. Whoa, spoiler alert. He needs to overcome a challenge, and then the game explores that. And then the card game is actually, I was like, well, in the comic, there's again a challenge that the entire family is separated in well, it's all spoiler stuff, but they get separated into like in like a castle, and they have to meet each other, and they have to meet at a certain place in order to escape. Okay. And so that actually is, you know, we can replicate that with a card game. With each player is one of the family members, and they start out in a different place, and they have to journey on their own journey in order to come together, in order to overcome a big challenge cooperatively. So it is it is more or less a cooperative card game. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So kind of give the viewers and maybe the podcast listeners kind of a background of Baby Barbarian, the storyline of the first book.
You mean like how I thought about it, or the storyline of the book?
Both. That's a great. Yeah, I mean, just kind of give people where your inspiration. Yeah, for your inspiration for it came from, and then what the back of the back of the book synopsis is that people could expect.
Okay, so I came up with it, during COVID, and I was like everyone else, like at the very beginning, I was super bummed, right? I was like, what's going on? And my wife had just started this job, and she was super busy. And then my son and I were stuck in this little apartment because we just moved back to Seattle, and so we weren't established yet. And I was like, if I don't do something positive, I'm gonna just fray. Right. And so I was there with my son, and he's kind of a wild man, and I'm a little bit of a wild man too. And so I think it just sort of emerged, that the barbarian trope. And one of the things is that, the trope of the rage mechanic, which is very common to barbarians, I use it kind of as a metaphor for ADHD and wildness, because I'm ADHD and my son we don't know, but he's wired like me. Yeah. And it's and one of the themes is that how do you control that intensity, because it's not just like the rage power is not a bad thing inherently, but it's a dangerous thing, and ADHD also is, you know what I mean? It can lead you to make kind of impulsive bad decisions, but there's a lot of benefits to it, a lot. Right. And I know your background, you worked in a lot of places. You probably encountered a lot of people that were high functioning under stressful situations. And that's kind of classic ADHD, and so I think it just kind of emerged out of all those things, all of the confluence of all of those elements and all the circumstances. And then the comic, the synopsis is it's about a family, the Berserk family, Brom, Bjorn, and Brunhild. So Brom is the boy, is about my son's age. Imagine that. Bjorn is the dad, and he has some issues like me. Imagine that. And then Brunhild is the mom, and they've left their like ancestral Thwaite, and they go into this town called Lethome, and that's where they sell their she has a business selling like all things pickled, and he has a like a fur business where he sells like otter underwear and stuff like that to keep the male chafe away. And when they arrive there, there's another stranger who's come into town. It's the inciting event, right? And he happens to have some magical items that, of course, end up enticing not just the village, but one of the members of the Berserk family in particular. And it happens to be it's called the Player's Throne. The comic is called the Player's Throne. So it's a throne that's sort of modeled off of course, the Iron Throne, which is except instead of being made out of swords, it's made out of all kinds of garden implements. Mm-hmm. And you can see it over there. That's him. That's Mr. Mountebank, and he is he's trying to entice people to sit on it, because then it will send them off to a land of endless fun and games. And believe it or not, one of the family members sits on it and is sent off, and then the rest of the family has to go and find them and then return. And that's basically it. Okay. That's the synopsis.
And so you have this as listed as book 1, correct? Is that
part 1? Yeah,
part 1. And so you plan on having this as an ongoing series, or what's your plan for Baby Barbarian?
We're actually working on part 2 right now. So we want to do the part 2 Kickstarter prior to the card game. Okay. And actually that's for a practical reason, because we're sort of, we're making cards out of the art that we have.
Oh, cool.
it's a little bit of a, you know, because you make your cards and you can just take little snippets of the images and throw them in, right?
Right.
And so that would be part 2 of the Player's Throne. And then we're going to do that. But then I do have another story arc, and that would be when the family, basically they meet somebody else when they have been transported off to this castle. They meet somebody else in the castle who then returns with them, and that individual is separated from their family. So then at the end of the Player's Throne, they're going to leave their mountains. They're going to leave their mountain. You know, they're very isolated, and that's another theme is that this is, you know, a small, you know, big fish in a small pond. You know what I mean? These are just, you know, simple mountain folk, you know, mountain barbarians. And then when they leave, it's the first time all of them have left. They're going to take this person with them, and they're going to try and reunite them with their family. And then we're going to be able to explore more of the world, which I'm really excited about. You know, I mean, world building is really one of the, I think, my primary interest, almost more than, you know, fiction. I just love world building. I mean, that's what fantasy is all about, really, you know?
Right. And so talk to us a bit about that. Like, so you kind of, you know, as you say, that you started off, you know, when COVID hit, kind of started formulating this idea. So you start off with character ideas with the Barbarians. And then from there, did you write the story or did you create the world next?
I wrote the story because I don't think this is uncommon with a lot of fantasy writers, but a lot of the tropes are so embedded in us, you know what I mean, that, you know, they almost sort of emerge naturally. And actually, you know, I'm actually, because it is sort of it's a lighthearted, it's, you know, it's kind of a satirical version, you know, of fantasy, right? So I actually, a lot of the tropes that you would know, I'm sure, from fantasy, I sort of poke fun at them. And I don't think that's uncommon nowadays. You know what I mean? I think there's so many, you know, fantasy is so well healed at this point.
Right.
I mean, so I just wrote the story. And the other thing that's great working with the artist, Igor Wolski, I mean, he's just incredible. He is an incredible artist. I mean, I don't know how much longer he'll work with me because he's probably going to get enormously famous, you know what I mean? But the fun thing about working with him is that he will just, I give him, like in the second part of the script, I've given him fewer and fewer prompts because I know he's just going to fill it up with incredible little funny things. Like there's that picture where they have the shark over the roof. That was not in my prompt.
Right.
And then there's 2 characters that he created that recur. And I didn't write those characters in, but now I'm like, I just love them. They're these 2 little kids. And I just love them that I put them into the second script as sort of like these recurring characters that are always doing little actions in the background. You know what I mean? That's like kind of unrelated, but kind of related to the story arc. And so, yeah, I think I'm just, you know, the world is just emerging. And the funny thing is that, you know, writers always talk about like, oh yeah, you know, I was like, you know, oh, my character wouldn't say that because, you know, my character talks to me. And I was like, yeah, right, that really happens to you, you know what I mean? But then I was like, oh my God, I actually understand. Like I re-looked at my script and I was like, no, my characters wouldn't say that. And I was like, oh, I got hit by lightning, man.
Because you have like, you got an MFA in creative writing, correct?
Nonfiction creative writing, yeah.
No, and you've worked in kind of like game design and graphic novels. You've written stuff like this before. Is this, compare Baby Barbarian to some of your previous work? Is this something that you feel more connected to, or is this a project that is also just part of your timeline of projects that you'd say?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that this is the first project where, man, I haven't thought about that. You know, it's one of those things, because you often think like, you know, it's like the path of one's life. Sometimes you don't think about it, and then you're like, wait a second, there has been sort of a trajectory, right? That maybe makes sense, except you don't, because you lived it, you haven't actually parsed it out or figured out how it's connected. Yeah, it's different. And the thing is, when I wrote it, I kind of wrote it. Another reason why I decided to do it is because, you know, I do know that YA comics are very popular right now. They're very popular, and like everyone, you know, we'll maybe talk about this a little bit later, but you know, it was picked up by a publisher that is trying to get into YA. You know what I mean? So everybody's trying to get into YA. So that was a consideration for me. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, you know, this is something that could have more legs than something else, you know, and people often caution against writing to market, because then it's inauthentic. You know what I mean? It's like, don't write something because everyone else is writing it. Number one, you might finish after the trend is already gone. And then number two, if you don't have enough of a love for it, then you won't finish it yourself, because this has been a lot of work and it's been very hard. But I would say this is the first mature thing I've written. I think that's the best way, ironically, because it's a book, you know, it's a book about barbarians, and it's very silly, but it's mature. Right. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. And like, I'm like processing it now.
So we have, you know, writers that will listen and watch the podcast, and they might be, you know, they tune in to maybe to get some inspiration and some ideas and advice. What they say is like, hey, you know, this is great, Bill. I got something written up. Who do I share this with to see if I get something going on here? What would be your advice and suggestions to say, take it to here, or find a place here? What would be your advice for someone that has a script, they wrote a comic script, but they don't know what to do, what the next steps would be?
That's a good question. Well, I think number one, you know, you can download online. Like, for example, when I was first starting out doing scripts for comic books, I downloaded, I like Kurt Busiek a lot. Do you know him? He wrote like Astro City and stuff like that.
Okay.
And he did some great Avengers work. Anyways, he's a comic book writer. I found some of his scripts online, downloaded them, and just look at the form of the script.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Look at the form, because a lot of comic book writers are different. I think that guy, what's his name? He wrote everything in DC for a while, and he was running DC for a while. Paul or something like that. Jeff Johns. Is that sound right? Jeff Johns.
Maybe. Yeah.
I think I saw his scripts, and there was like a very little direction to the writer, you know. And then there's guys like Alan Moore who are like, they're down to the minutia. You know, one panel might be one page. Wow. So you can download some scripts, take a look at what other established writers are doing, and you can juxtapose those with the actual book. Presumably, if you're writing a comic book script, you know comic books, and you have some comic books you love, right? And then after that, I would recommend, the thing is, about when I got my MFA, right? I remember there was a writer, and they said, after 12 years, I felt that I had learned the craft well enough that now I was able to write. This kind of craft, I mean, there's a reason why they call it craft and not art, right? Because it takes a long time to be a good writer of any genre, of any form. And so, I think what happens is that we often have a really good idea, and we write it, and we cherish it so much, and you know what I mean? And then you put it out, and then, somebody will point out basic flaws, and then you're just crestfallen, and, it's just like someone punctured your balloon, you know what I mean? And I think you have to be able to disengage from your art a little bit. And that's very hard because, art is an egoic exercise, you know what I mean? But you should find some kind of community, even if it's only one other person, to bounce it off with. And often it needs to be somebody who's kind of on the same level as you, I think, or a little bit better, because if you're just starting out, you might not get any callbacks, right? You can't just cold call somebody and, hey, I got the script. You know what I mean? Maybe some people can if you have good connections, but that hasn't really been my experience.
Right.
And, and you just got to learn the craft. And, but one thing you can do is that I am involved in tons of groups on Facebook. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there are people over there. There's groups. Just look for groups, comic book creators, and you can put it out there. Hey, do you want to critique each other's work? You know what I mean? And take a look. But there is a lot of, to be honest, there's a lot of research that needs to be done. And I think sometimes, I've been doing this for so long, now that I think about it, that you kind of forget, just the nuts and bolts and just the baby steps that it took to arrive at the point where you instinctively know if something's working or not.
Right.
Actually, it's not instinctive. It's because you've trained yourself. So you have to put in that time. I think, we have that. I don't know why people think that writing is different from other things. There's like that thing of the brain surgeon. It's like, you know what, when I quit brain surgery, I'm going to write the great, story of my life. And it's going to go, it's like, well, you did 30 years of brain surgery and, other people wrote for 30 years. Why do you think that you can just 1 year later, a masterpiece? You know what I mean?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right.
It trivializes the entire craft, like you just said. Yeah. It's like,
yeah. Is that? I hope that's helpful. And I don't want to discourage people, but it's just, the other thing is you just have to love it enough, right? You have to love. Most writers I know, they are gonna do it no matter what. They're gonna do it no matter what, and it's just a certain calling that certain people have. I remember there was this when I used to teach English in Hawaii, and there was this young Korean lady. She's like early 20s, and this was before I returned to writing. And they called her Carver, and then her last name. I won't say her last name because I don't want to, but they called her Carver because she read Raymond Carver, and one of the reasons why she wanted to learn English was so she could read Raymond Carver in English. And I remember telling her one day, I was like, you know what? It never goes away. If you want to write, you should just write. And I was like, oh man, I told her what I needed to tell myself. And then I realized, I was like, yeah. But the point is that, she went on to do some pretty amazing things, but it just doesn't go away. If you really have that bug, it doesn't go away. Right. So embrace it and get ready for what did Harlan Ellison tell somebody in the workshop at the, he said, he told one guy, you're not going to be a writer. And then he said, you are going to be a writer. Dan Simmons, who wrote like Hyperion and stuff. And he says, and he told the whole group, he says, you think that I'm doing him a favor by telling him he's going to be a writer, but I'm not. Because what I'm telling him is that he's going to have a rocky road ahead and a lot of heartache and a lot of struggle. Anyway, that's typical Harlan Ellison for you, right?
and so what would you say for them? And how did you find Igor? How did you find him?
I was internet stalking artists, and I just saw, I had never seen anything like his art. And I don't know if you saw some of his other art. He's actually, right now, he's working on, for the second Kickstarter, we're going to be doing a little bit more marketing. So I'm actually going to be talking to a marketing group, and so they need assets. And so I said, Igor, hey man, let's do, he often will do these incredible pictures. He'll draw them live on Facebook, and they're one panels of these incredibly detailed pictures. I said, can you do that one? So I don't know if you've seen those, but I saw those a few years ago, and I was like, oh my God, this guy is incredible.
Right.
Just incredible. And so he's working on one right now. I don't know what it's going to look like because I gave him the second script. And I said, why don't you figure out what you want to draw? You know what I mean? But it's going to be kind of like a big picture,
Right.
And this stuff is, Baby Barbarian is kind of tame compared to some of his other stuff, man.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah.
And he does the coloring and everything on this, right?
I have a colorist who does the flats, and then I have the final. These are not the final pages, but
Okay.
I found a lot of the artists that I find on Facebook. To be honest with you, you know?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And there's an Egyptian woman, young woman, and she did this kind of watercolor effect for the colors.
Okay.
And it really looks good.
Wow.
And then the letterer is this incredibly talented guy from Argentina named Lucas.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just like project managing most of the time, and writing scripts every now and then.
Right. So what would be, I guess my question too for you is, what is the, for advice there's a few ways you could go. One is, as you say, kind of like project manage it more or less. But what would be the benefits or drawbacks by finding one person that would do it all, do the lettering and the coloring and the flats and the drawing and all that stuff?
Is there anybody who can do that?
I maybe not well everything. It's like the whole uncommon service model is like, if you're be really good at one thing and then be unabashedly mediocre at everything else.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, from I guess from a business perspective, because if somebody has written written up something, you're going to end up having to pay for quality in a way too, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So what would be your suggestion to say? So I guess the question is for you is that commitment that you came into with, like, okay, we're going to do a Kickstarter. This is how much I'm going to have to pay forward to make sure we get something going. And what were some of those challenges? Because you said in a previous interview that you learned a lot doing your first Kickstarter. What are some of those lessons that you're going to be able to take with you to put forward on your next Kickstarter?
Well, like I said, I think I'm going to be using an agency.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and this is not uncommon in this life, right? And you understand as you get a little bit older, it's like you learn, like I taught myself while we were doing this a little bit of Adobe Photoshop, because that's what everybody uses. And that is a really hard program. And, I got to a point where I was a bit functional with it. And I was like, you know what? I understand it. I kind of understand what's capable of it. Now I'm going to outsource it to other people. You know what I mean? Right. Because, well, I mean, what is that trifecta they always have, right? It's quality, money, or time.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, I think what I really realized, and I realized this when I had a business in Hawaii, was, I learned how to do, it was a business where I was doing equipment repairs and stuff like that. And I learned how to do it. And it took me a long time. But what I realized was that if you can outsource that work to somebody else and you make some of the money because you've outsourced it, and then you have more time to do other things, you don't have to do the stuff that you don't like.
Right.
You're more effective because you're doing the stuff that you do like, and then you're more efficient because because you know enough about what to do that you can outsource it effectively. Does that make sense?
Right. It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you kind of identified and found these folks, what would be your recommendation? Did you have to put together like a contract with them, or is it more of like a handshake situation? What would be your recommendation for?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. That is a very legitimate concern. So actually I did, we met through Stephanie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I know her from an attorney friend of ours. And so I had him drop kind of a boilerplate contract for me. And I did use that because I was like, I realized, you know, in the past I've done stuff kind of half-assed, and then I was like, you know what? Why would I spend all this time and this energy on something and then not just do that one little extra step of getting a contract and asking the people I'm collaborating with to sign it? Because my intention, from the beginning, was to build IP, and that is like characters, world names, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I always was. I'm not a greedy person by nature. That's not my nature. And I think I can say that. That's not like a humble thing. That's just like a reality thing. And so I'm okay with sharing, you know, sharing whatever bounty I get with the people I'm working with.
Right.
You know, I'm okay with that. I like that. You know, I think that's a good thing, especially artists, right?
Right.
You know, I'm an artist. I love artists, you know, and but I wanted to make sure that nobody has anything on my IP, my intellectual property,
right?
Because, you know, I have plans for ratcheting it up into different iterations. So yes, I did use contracts for some of the people that, like, particularly the ones I was working with the most, like Igor, we have a contract. The game designer, I have a contract. The video game people, I have a contract with. You know, some of the colorists, they're in different countries. The colorists are both in different countries. We didn't work that much together. The letterer, so I just, email is also admissible, right, in court. So I just like, hey, can you just do me a favor and just say, I understand that I have no, you know, this is a work for hire, and that's what it's called. You know, I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but in general, when you are working, when you're on a project like this, you're working one of two ways. One is a work for hire, and that is where you get paid and then you're done. The other one is where you have some form of ownership of the project, and that means you will get royalties, or you'll get a cut of the Kickstarter, whatever extra money there's left over after everything, and royalties is, you know, is kind of the big one. Yeah, so I was either email or this one contract that I used, and I sort of tailored it to different people depending upon what my particular arrangement was with them. And a lot of the arrangements, and to be honest, like, I actually offered royalties to Igor because I wanted him to be invested in the project.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because this could not move forward without him. I can get another colorist. I can get another letterer. I mean, sorry if you guys are watching this. I'm sorry, I can't, because they're very talented, very, very talented people, and particularly the letterer Lucas has been helping me out enormously. And that guy, well, we're getting to the point where he might be, you know, a must-have as well, because he's one of these people. He keeps on getting more and more gigs, and the lettering he did on the finals is just phenomenal.
Right.
But the point being that, you know what I mean, I wanted to make sure that Igor wanted to work with me, you know.
Is this his work here?
But you got to see the new pages, because he changed up the font a little bit to match the watercolor.
Okay.
But, you know, that's going to be coming out with a comic when it comes out, the actual comic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, he's super talented.
So this is a 32-page comic, correct? The first.
It's 28 pages, and then we have covers. We had 3 covers.
Okay.
Actually, my high school friend did one of them for us. He did the main cover, and then we have actually a fairly well-established fantasy artist named Travis Hansen did another one, and then I wanted to do kind of a manga style, because I understood that, you know, manga is super popular with the kids, especially. So I was like, put on Facebook, I was like, hey, anyone here can do a manga style cover? And this Italian guy, I liked his art, and so he did the 3rd cover for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so these are pictures we're looking at now. This is your Metroidvania style game.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep. And I just met with them, I think last Tuesday, and we're getting very close, and it looks great. It looks great. You know what I mean? I'm very happy. I mean, ideally, you know, I got to go in steps, right? Comic book, card game. Ideally, I would be able to fund enough to make a real Metroidvania, but
was this an idea that was thrust upon you, or this is an idea that you had from the beginning, the IP of because you kind of said earlier that it was kind of a passing idea, but was this part of your, as you said, you ran a business, was this part of your strategic plan, and to say, all right, I want to have this come out?
No, like it was literally like I was just starting out, and I, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, just the reality is that, you know, like any industry is you have to have a little bit of credibility before doors will open, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't have anything from at the beginning, you know what I mean? But I had a friend and I knew that he liked to do video games. And so I called him up. I was like, hey man, you know, I don't know, this is kind of crazy, but you've always wanted to blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, I can't do it myself, but I'm working with these people. I was just trying to, I don't know, man. I was just like doing the shotgun thing, you know?
Right.
And then it just kind of emerged. I think that's, if I have like one talent, it's the ability to just sort of see something and see an opportunity in it.
Right.
And I can pivot also. I mean, I'm ADHD, right? And so you can pivot very fast. Okay, that door closed. Let's go somewhere in another direction. Right. This person can't help me. I'll go in another direction. But I know where I'm going, you know. And so we were like, well, we can't make it a full video game, so we'll just make it a teaser. And it was a reward, and we're gonna we'll definitely be using it as a way to advertise for the coming other things, right? You know what I mean? Like the other Kickstarters for the card game and for the comic book. You know, it's not a bad, what they call an opt-in. An opt-in is where like, can we get your information so we can send you an email when this happens? It's modern marketing, you know. And this is not a bad opt-in as opt-ins go, you know.
This is pretty unique too. I haven't seen like a video game add-on basically of it. It's pretty, and your backers will be thanked in the game's credits as well, which is pretty fun.
That was a team. The other thing about this is that, like for me, I think if I have another talent is I ask good questions. I don't have solutions. I just ask good questions. So I was like, wow, man, what can we do about, you know, how can we make this thing like a, and then I got answers from the team in Hawaii. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. Yeah.
So what's is there any other is there anything else you want to do with this IP, like tabletop role-playing game or children's books, or any other ideas that that's kind of like in the hopper right now for you?
Well, I can't talk about it because no, I'm just kidding. Right, they always say that, right? I can't talk about it because of I can talk about it. Yes, I'm the guy. Well, there's actually a game group that I belong to. These very funny Englishmen, and they're just hilarious. And they have a podcast. And I'm not going to say it because I actually haven't approached them yet, but they know all the mechanics for role playing games. I don't know them. You know what I mean? And I was almost, and they're like, no, we'll never make a role playing game. And I was like, you know what? I should ask them to make a role playing game. Right. You know, because the other thing is, and you know, just from a practical standpoint, they have a pretty large audience, right? Because they're podcasts and they're pretty funny and they've created a good community. So I would love to do like a TTRPG tabletop role playing game. You know, why not? Right. In fact, my other friend who's been supported from the beginning, he's like, oh, you can make it a role playing game? Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I think, you know, like the ultimate would be, you know, some kind of a animation. I think, you know, like a cartoon. I think it can happen. I don't think it's, the other thing about right now, this time period, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a fine artist, but he works at a school in town here. It's an art school. And he's like, yeah, I work with these four people. They're young people in their 20s. And they're all trained fine artists, and they teach that. But all of them on the side are doing like character design, computer animation. They're all doing this stuff, you know, especially the younger people, you know what I mean? Right. And there's just, and I mean, you remember when we were growing up, I mean, when you're growing up, like we didn't have the internet, we didn't have all that stuff, but there is so much. And that's the other thing. Kickstarter is the same way. You know what I mean? Crowdfunding, I realized at a certain point, crowdfunding is the new economy.
Yeah.
It is, you know what I mean? And then you suddenly realize, like, people are making $2 million on a Kickstarter. Yeah. You know what I mean? And there are people who only support Kickstarters for their genre stuff, for their games and for their comics. Right. It's the new economy. And so that's, you know, that's why, and the same thing with, you know, the resources out there. There are so many resources. The problem is, and this was the problem that I was talking to with a card game designer, the problem is distribution.
Yeah.
Distribution is a challenge.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I tell you, if somebody can find out how to distribute effectively all of these incredible Kickstarted games and comics, I mean, they're just going to destroy the traditional, you know what I mean? Because Kickstarter and crowdfunding has really kind of upended the publishing industry.
Right.
You know what I mean? But nobody, sorry.
I was going to say that I just like having a Kickstarter store, like having like a brick and mortar Kickstarter store that only sells Kickstarter things. Yeah.
I thought the same thing. I think, you know, I don't know what I was doing the other day, but I was having a moment and I was like, I should send, there is a woman actually who works on behalf of Kickstarter as comic outreach. And I was like, I should send her an email. Like, have you guys thought about it? I think you're exactly right. Yeah, Barney. Totally.
It's like, you know, when you go to the your neighborhood drugstore and it always has that one section as seen on TV, all the stuff you've seen on TV, like having like dedicated sections of like everything you've seen on Kickstarter right here.
Do they have those in the drugstore?
No, they don't, but that would be good to have like.
No, but as seen on TV, they have those?
They do, yeah.
Ah, there you go. But the problem with distribution is that you're always running into the big corporations. You know what I mean? Like Diamond was distributing comics, all that. They had just a stranglehold on it, you know. And so, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, that's great. So talk to us. So what's next? So as you say, you're working on, you know, part 2 now. That will not be kickstarted though, correct?
No, we're going to kickstart it for sure.
You're still going to kickstart. Okay, good. Okay, all right.
Yeah. So the thing is, I have a publishing deal with Scout Comics. And it Scout's new all-aged called Scoot. And so so now, but basically it's one of these it's called a creator-driven deal. And what it is that I am going to I kickstart the projects and then they do distribution. So again, we were just talking about distribution, right? That's one of the reasons why I did when they approached me, I was like, yeah, you know what? Distribution, they can work with distribution because they have, you know, they're a publisher. I think they're under Simon & Schuster. So they have ins into bookstores and stuff like that. And, you know, what the other thing is that they would have they would better be able to format the comic because, you know, we have to self-print our comics, right? Which there are a lot of companies that do that, but really for YA comics, it's the little books, like the bone-sized books, that is the best. And you know, Scout could do that as well and get those into bookstores and stuff like that. But I can still kickstart that first one, and then kickstart the card game as well. And I actually confirmed that with the publisher. Can I do that? You know what I mean? Because we have a multimedia agreement as well. And he's like, no, it's just like the comic. You can kickstart or whatever you want, but then distribution, we have to talk again. But you know what? Hey, is that the worst thing in the world if they can distribute my card game into bookstores? Not really, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I want to do that. And then, I don't know, after that, I kind of want to keep going with Baby Barbarian, but, you know, I guess I have more ideas. And then do, like expansion card game packs that sort of mirror as the world is exposed
Right.
to the reader, then the card game will synchronize with that.
That sounds fun. That is fun stuff. I mean, it's like you as a creative, you're kind of like a kid in a candy store with having all these opportunities to see what you can do with it. So congratulations, Bill. That's exciting stuff for you right now.
Thank you, Barney.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, I mean, just to, before we wrap up, but just as, I think, you just got to find the right people.
Right.
I think I'm very good at communicating. You know what I mean? And, just if you can find the right people and communicate with them in a respectful, responsible way, they're like this card game guy, man. He loves this stuff.
Right.
I mean, he's working on it at home and taking it to his family. And I'm like, I don't know all that stuff. So I gave him the basic ideas for what I think it should be like. And he's just he's cranking away. You know what I mean? And he's stoked. And I'm stoked too. And it's like, worse things than being excited about what you're doing, right?
That's awesome. Yeah. So make sure. So Bill, come back on the show when you're ready for when the book 2 comes out, or when the cards come out, and everything. So
well, if you'll have me.
Yeah, of course. This has been great. This has been a great conversation, Bill. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thanks to Steph for introducing us.
Steph's amazing. Yeah.
She just did a pull quote for me for the comic. So I asked her if she would do that.
Nice.
Yeah, because she's a writer, as you know. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, she's a great person. Barney, you're the man. I love talking to you, and thank you so much for your insightful questions. And now I got to go find your podcast.
Exactly.
I don't know if you've seen. Do you follow video games at all?
I like there's a few video game streamers that I'll watch some of the classics. There's a gentleman that I watch. He does speed runs of 80s classic Nintendo games that I get all reminiscent over watching.
What do you mean speed runs?
He'll do he'll do a speed run of Castlevania, or like Ninja Gaiden, like all these ones that you and I were playing, when we were kids. He'll sit down and he'll play like the entire Ninja Gaiden game for like 20 minutes. He'll go from beginning all the way to the end and just play it. Like
So is that that's a thing, huh?
That's a thing. Like it's nostalgia abound watching these. I can't remember his name offhand, but if you just type in classic Nintendo speedrun on YouTube, you'll be like, oh, I forgot this game, like RC Pro-Am, like the games that you don't remember, you remember but forgot about, basically. And
he's just so good, he can just go through the whole thing in one that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And because but if you think about it, those games is all just about timing, and it's not, because they're pre-programmed, so there's not a lot of work on there. But it's pretty fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know my son watches a lot of Roblox YouTubers and stuff like that, but I'm not really that guy. But
but the classic, the old Nintendo games, like just watching someone play Adventure of Link, like Zelda 2. I'm like,
Bionic Commando.
Bionic Commando, yeah, like all those. Gauntlet. Watching these games, like you completely forgot. Yeah.
Bringing me back there. Gauntlet was a classic fantasy, wasn't it?
That was fun. Yeah.